Hi, I'm back. It's Donna Balzer. And if you're seeing me here on Facebook Live, welcome. And if you're seeing me here on YouTube, that's fantastic too. I've started to put all the videos onto YouTube so that people can follow along and get all their gardening questions answered. And that's what it's all about today, getting your gardening questions answered. Yes, I know it's the long weekend. Well, I've been hanging out all day doing hardly anything, but I can tell you what I have been doing, and that's rooting raspberries. It's so exciting. But let's go to the questions because I'm answering questions here today, and people can send those to me. I know a lot of times people actually try to slip in just a little question by email or Facebook Messenger or something. It's really hard for me to focus when I'm not focused on you, when I'm just doing something else. So try to keep your questions to Facebook Live. So again, I'm Donna. I'm a horticulturist. I'm a speaker. I'm an author. I have a couple of books, but my newest one is the Garden Gratitude Journal. So that's something that lets you write down every day for 3 years. Let me pick a day that I've written for 2 years already now. When you write every day, you have just a little space to fill in with each day's information, and you can circle what the temperature's like, if it's raining or snowing or what's going on, because that lets you build up your own personal reference so that by the end of the year, you know what's going on. You don't have to ask me when to do something. You know after 3 years when you've been writing it down. So people say to me, I'm not good at journaling, I'm not good at writing, but honestly, this only takes you a minute a day because it's just that one line and doesn't take a lot more. And Sean's here. Hi, Sean. Like me, Sean's probably just working, even though it's a holiday. You're probably working, but thanks. Welcome. Welcome. Happy to see you. So I just finished presenting in Victoria last weekend, and that was going undercover, which was really interesting. I was talking about all the different ways you can cover up plants and get things to grow. And I found this great photograph of a garden I had toured in Wales, because they're very big with big walls in Wales, and those big walls give so much heat. And along one of those walls, they actually had a little greenhouse, which I thought was interesting. So that was in Wales. I showed that on Saturday. Cross off Victoria. That's done. If you're following along with my appearances page, my next appearance is on Salt Spring Island, and that is February 27th. And I just looked at the calendar, and that is next week already. So it was just the middle of the month yesterday, or 2 days ago, and I was speaking in Victoria, and the end of the month is already next year. So go figure that out. Anyway, so next week, Salt Spring Island. And Josie's here. Oh, great. And I think I just met you in Grand Prairie. Are you the Josie I just met in Grand Prairie last week? If so, welcome. I would love to get to your question right away. I just want to mention another question I had from Grand Prairie, which was about roses. And probably Sean can chime in here because she's probably grown roses too. So the question was about what roses to grow in Grand Prairie. And honestly, I always tell people to start with the Explorer roses, but make sure you start with the roses that are on their own root. When they've been grafted, sometimes they're not as hardy. So hardy zone 3, like let's just say an Explorer rose. So the whole Explorer the whole Explorer group, like Jens Monk and Henry Thompson, all of those are absolutely tremendous, but they're only hardy to zone 3 if they're on their own roots. Sometimes they graft them onto other roots, and that means that they're not going to be hardy, maybe a zone 5, so the plant itself will die back. So that was my basic answer, but I forgot to mention to that question, and this was via messenger, so I said I'd have to get back to you, was the very special rose called Pink Lemonade. That's a pretty new one that I tried a couple of years ago in Calgary, and it looks really great. Yes. Okay. So Jose has a question. My dahlias were totally dried out last year and no bugs on it. What could have caused that? Totally dried out. Are you talking about your flowers were totally dried out? The actual flower buds dried back? Because sometimes that's botrytis, and I'll just write that down. And botrytis is disease, and it's spread by ants, believe it or not, and it causes drying of roses and dahlias. So or dahlias if you're from there. And it could have been that. I'm not saying for sure it is that, but I actually know that if the buds don't open at all, they're kind of aborted. It's often botrytis. And what we've been finding out more and more with soil is that it's the really small nutrients that are causing those nutrient deficiencies. Maybe it's copper, maybe it's zinc. And when you get your complete soil test done, not just the partial one that tells you nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, but the complete test, it'll tell you where your micronutrients are at. And the other thing that could have happened, Jose, is that you might have had not just a nutrient deficiency, not just a botrytis, maybe they just dried out. So remember that they need a lot of water. Okay, I hope that helps. It's really hard to say without seeing it. It would be really great. Last fall, I had a Dahlia specialist in, and we discussed all things Dahlia. And she is huge on watering her dahlias. She just keeps water going to them all the time. She just waters them constantly. Although she puts in an overhead cover because the rain splash itself can trigger all kinds of problems with the flower buds as well as with the flowers. So she puts in, it looks like one of those walk-in tunnels, one of those high tunnels that the vegetable farmers use. So I hope that helps. Julia is joining us. She's saying, what vegetable seeds can be started indoors in Vancouver, BC? Well, you can start anything indoors, but the truth is some things like radish will germinate at 0 degrees, or spinach will germinate at a very cold temperature, so they don't really need, if you've got limited space indoors, I would say that maybe, I don't know if you're asking about right now, what the questions are right now that you can, maybe you're asking what vegetables can be started right now. What I've done so far is, and other people have chimed in last week and the week before, we've all started our onions. If you're doing onions, and leeks and shallots, because those things take months and months and months to grow. Now, many people prefer to just buy the little sets, but if you're growing something specialized like leeks, or maybe you are growing shallots, which is something I'm always trying to grow better, then they have to be started usually in February. Other things that need to be started really early, and I was looking back in my journal and I saw last year I started my celery in February, and I started my celeriac, which is a very funny little, it's like a root of celery. I started that in February too. So for vegetables, there's not a lot to start now. It's definitely too early to be starting most things, but because some things are super hardy, and I already said you didn't have to start your spinach, but if you wanted to start spinach or peas, if you did that now, 2 to 3 weeks from now, since you live in Vancouver, you might be able to plant them outside in a warm area. So you might want to start those now indoors. So give that a try. All right, Margo's here. Margo's says she's got a couple of questions about starting seeds indoors. First, if it's okay to use regular potting soil, or it's better to use special seed starting mix. I don't usually think about fertilizing, and I see that the package says it has enough fertilizer for 3 months. However, I will be transplanting my seedlings into bigger pots sooner than that. So is it worth the extra cost? Good question. Thank you for that, Margo. I know you're a fantastic gardener already, and you have your chickens and you have things growing. And so we'll get right to it. I like the special Pro Mix. There's also a Sunshine brand, and I use those because they have no nutrients in them. And I like to, just for the first week anyway, make sure that I've got no nutrients. After that, I use a special seed starter fertilizer. And anyone else that I met down at Victoria CD Saturday, they know I had some special seed starting fertilizer, which has only 1%, just 1% nitrogen and 8.5% of calcium. And most of the common fertilizers don't have any calcium, and that's what gives you those really tough cell walls. So for you, Margo, you probably don't have access to that special starting fertilizer because you're not near me. You could buy it, I guess, but you really have to keep the nutrients low. So it's really better to just start with something like Pro Mix or the Sunshine Mix. If you don't want to buy the special seed starting mix, you can buy just the regular mix, the one that you'll use to transplant into later. But I just crumble it up in my hand. So I just push it together, and that makes it finer, and that breaks it up a little bit. And then I moisten it before I put my seeds in, and that's what I do. And it always works, works pretty good. I don't find it's more expensive. I find it's the same cost. But as I say, I usually don't start with a seeding mix. I just buy the regular Pro Mix, which is, it's like also called soilless mix. You probably have seen it. It's not a specialized potting mix, but it's what all the commercial growers use. And I really like it because it's light, it drains fast, and it's pretty cheap. When you buy a big bag, a compressed bale, you get 107 liters. I think that's about $35. Now, normally you'd pay about $6 or $7 just for a loose bag, maybe 20 liters. Actually, don't quote me on that, but I know that they're quite expensive for very little because they're already fluffed up. So I buy the compressed bales. I take it out, I put it in my wheelbarrow, I fluff it up, and this all happens inside my greenhouse, so it's not too messy. And then I plant into it. So I hope that helps. Jose says her dahlias were watered well. So what I'm thinking is the rain splash. So sorry to seem schizophrenic here, but we're jumping back and forth. She had a dahlia that the bud was staying tight, but it wasn't opening properly. So just the rain splash, Jose, it can be, I don't know if you had a rainy summer last year, but the botrytis is a bacterial disease, so it could be the rain splash, it could be spreading it, or the ants that are spreading it, or a micronutrient deficiency. So if you know for sure that you've watered your dahlias well, it's probably a soil deficiency. So Julia, do you have a blog or a book that details annual growing in a greenhouse for crops? Well, what a great question. Almost like I posed that. I actually write regular because I'm a brand ambassador for the BC Greenhouse Builders. And BC Greenhouse Builders, if you look that up, is, I write a blog for them every month about what to start. So right now, I actually in February wrote about, there was a whole range of things, but you can also text me or I'll email you back later their connections. So I do have a blog as well. My blog is donnabalzer.com. So hold up my name tag in case you don't know, Donna Balzer. So it's Donna Balzer, BALZER.com. And I have quite a few things on there, and people often come in and interact with me as well as on this site. So I do write on the BC Greenhouse Builders site, but I also have my own site, donnabalzer.com. So I do quite a bit there. And with the greenhouse right now, Julia, did you say you were in Vancouver? So in Vancouver right now, if you're heating your greenhouse, then it's more like that it's like a commercial greenhouse, although it was so hot in mine yesterday because it was such a sunny day here. So some days are warm and some are not. If you're heating your greenhouse, that is a hot frame now. That is something that you can be growing forward. But if you're not heating it, if it's a cold frame, then you can use other methods. And I was also using, I've still got it here. In my greenhouse, I showed this last week, I use these roof and gutter de-icing cables, and I just put them into the soil. So I just did that last week, and then I plugged them in, and then it just warms up the soil, and then I cover the whole thing with Remay, also called Agribon, also called floating row cover. So I do that so that I can start my potatoes early. So I start my potatoes in grow bags, put them in the greenhouse on top of those soil heating cables. I don't bury the cables because I want to remove them as soon as this kind of chilly period is over and when I'm planting my warmer crops. So Margo had a second question. And hi, Monty. Thanks for joining us today. And Laura has also joined us. So thank you. Welcome. We'll be getting into some more questions, but I see we've got one here from Margo. Margo's wondering about heating mats. I've just been putting my newly planted trays in the furnace room on the furnace where it is warm, but I'm thinking about buying a heating mat. Do you need to buy the thermostat that comes extra? No need to buy the thermostat. What I find with mine, no need to get the thermostat, because what I found, it's really hard to type and do it all at once. I find that they only heat up the plants to maybe 70 degrees. There's a cutoff, and then it kind of turns off. So it never just keeps getting hotter and hotter and hotter. It'll just keep the plants cozy. The trouble with the furnace room, Margo, and I know when I used to have a furnace room, it gets quite dry in that space. And when it's dry in that space, it'll dry out the seeds. So sometimes they'll dry out before they even germinate. And the humidity is so low already in Calgary, and you're not in Calgary, but you're north. Honestly, with you, I would get one of those lids, put the lid on, put it over the heat mat, and that'll keep it cozy. I've also been using a bit of a burlap mat underneath the thing so that it doesn't just have sitting water, but that there is some moisture that it can access. So I think that's what I would do if I was you. I actually bought I've also always had the little heating mat, and I bought a really big one, and I put that on a piece of plywood that my husband cut to size. He's a helpful husband. And I bought the really big heating mat because that's how I was able to propagate my raspberries. And if we have time later, we'll get back to my raspberries, which are growing like crazy. So I'm really excited about that. Did I get all of Margo's question? Yeah, I think so. Monty's here, and Julia, most efficiency from all year round growing. Saw oak choy, I think she meant pak choy, on one of your Facebook and wonder when you started these. I want to grow next winter in the greenhouse. Well, follow along with me because you'll always know what I'm starting, and we're almost in the same climate here, Julia. Follow along and you'll always know what to start next. The pak choy I started in August, and I also started my spinach in August. And I do that because by October things sort of stop growing, because you have to look online and find out, at the actual where you're at. I know I have friends that garden in Whitehorse and friends that garden in Regina. So everybody's at a different latitude. The latitude you are at will tell you when you get the numbers of hours of days. And so about right now, we're just starting to get 10 hours of light a day. And now things are starting to grow. But during the winter in Vancouver, even in a greenhouse, you're going to find that the days are too short. Things are not really growing. So my bok choy has looked the same since November. It hasn't really changed. It's like being in a big fridge. So I just go out and pick what I need as I need it. And I absolutely love it. We had down to -8 here last week, and it was amazing. Nothing got frozen in my greenhouse. So that is really great. So Jose is still saying, so Jose, because your dahlias, back to your dahlias, were sheltered and they were well watered. So I do think you've got a botrytis problem. What I would do in the future, if you see a bud that's starting to dry up, go through with your pruning shears and clean them off right away. It's a good thing with dahlias anyways to only leave one bud per stem and rub the extra ones off, because otherwise you don't get the really big flowers. But I think you could have that botrytis problem, and that says to me that you probably have a micronutrient deficiency, not a big deficiency, but you have something out of balance. For instance, phosphorus has to be 10 times what you've got for zinc. And so if you get a soil test done and get that big soil test that tells you all your numbers, then you'll know if it's 10 times the amount, because if it's not, then your zinc, if it's not in that ratio 10 to 1, you could end up with problems like powdery mildew. I've seen that in the past. So okay, question. Julie Downs, are you attending any CD Saturdays with your new journal? Yes, I was just in Victoria, and I won't be in Vancouver because I didn't sign up early enough, but I'll be at, my daughter will be in Calgary on the CD Saturday in Calgary, and she's the co-author for the journal. And I'm just going to mention that if you haven't seen the journal, see how shiny this one is? It's because we plastic wrapped them. And I realized I've never actually shown you that. All of the journals aren't plastic wrapped. We just did some for garden centers because some people have been ordering sort of 5 or 20, or they want 30, a whole box. So we've plastic wrapped them special for the garden centers. But if you order them from me and want them plastic wrapped, we will send them to you. Remember, if you're buying them from garden centers, you're probably not getting the stickers. So you get that when you order them from me online. And right now I'm having trouble with PayPal. Okay, PayPal. That's been a bit of a problem. So, Julia, I am attending CD Saturdays. I was at Qualicum Beach and I was at Victoria, but I am finished now, and Chelsea will be in Calgary. And I think that's it for CD Saturdays. I'm speaking quite a bit. So you can see that on my website on appearances. And that's where I've got them all listed, because honestly, when I looked today and saw that next week I'm in Salt Spring, I was a little shocked. I've got it all written now. Not to worry, I will make it there, but I don't have it. Okay, Caroline. Oh, hi, Caroline. What have we got here? Should we be knocking off the snow from blooming heathers? You know, when the snow is really heavy, it doesn't matter if it's a heather or if it's another kind of broadleafed evergreen, that heavy snow, and we have a laurel here, the snow will really break the branches because it's starting to get really heavy now. So the heathers will be pushed apart. It won't stop the blooms. Those heathers are extremely hardy, but it might break the plant apart. So just, kick it with your foot or knock it, or take a broom out. I had to take a broom out and knock some off of some of my pine trees because I have a narrow pine tree. I have a little white pine that's the very soft 5-needled, and because that heavy snow really made it lean out. So with a heather branch, if it's a tiny heather, it's probably okay. If it's a bigger one, then you're going to see that it's going to be splitting in the middle if you've got too much snow. Now, I think the snow is going to melt, but who knows? We could get more snow at any time. So if you do have a heavy patch of snow on top of a heather and it's a large heather, I would knock it off, or any of your deciduous evergreens, broadleaf evergreens, sorry. All the broadleaf evergreens are the ones that keep their leaves all winter. And even some of the evergreens, which we know, like I said, by pine, they start to get weighed down too, especially if they're the columnar forms. So you kind of have to knock off the snow. So it's not a bad practice. It's a really good idea. So I think that's a good idea. I'm just thinking about Julia's question again. CD Saturdays, my friend Joyce is going to be at the one in Vancouver, and maybe she'll bring some books for me. Not sure. And also, if you're in Vancouver, they're at the Figaro's Garden Center, and they are also at the big, all the big garden centers. So just ask, and you should be able to get it there as well. I think that should be good. All right, I was really, really, really wanting to tell everyone about my raspberries, and we seem to have a little break in the action here. So my raspberries came from my neighbor. I had a student here in January. Some of you were following that. And my neighbor walked by one day and said, "Hey, we're just pruning our raspberries if you need any cuttings." And we were like, "What? Do we need cuttings?" "Yes, we'd love to have some cuttings." So we went across to Cindy's house and we picked up a big bundle of cuttings and we took them back to the greenhouse and we cut them into sections. So each section was maybe 6 inches long, and we had buds at the bottom and the middle and the top. So at least 3 buds for each section. So sometimes raspberries will only have 3 buds in an 8-inch section, and then cut at 8 inches. You want to have at least 3 buds. The bottom bud, you break off, you just kind of rough it off. And then you take that stem and you stick it into something like ProMix. But before you do that, you buy this product. You don't have to, but I found this really helps. This is the Stim-Root, and I went with the number 3 because there's different numbers, 1, 2, and 3, because it's a rooting hormone. And I don't even know if it's certified organic, but I know when I'm starting raspberries or blackberries, or what else could I start? Little shrubs, like all the different cherry trees. You could start those easily, especially the hardy cherries. I would do them if I'm doing them when they're dormant, which is this time of year. I also did some figs last week, so I've got quite a few pots on my ginormous heating pad up in my greenhouse. Now remember, I'm using my greenhouse as a cold frame. I'm not actually heating the whole greenhouse. So what I do is I put down that heating mat. I put down the trays. I have all of my little raspberries cut to size and dipped in. And when you dip them into these, you actually knock it off right after you dip them in because you don't want too much rooting hormone. Stick them into the tray, water really carefully, and then cover with your floating row cover, Agribon, Rime, whatever brand you've got. And that just keeps the heat in. And if you use the really heavy variety, there's up to 50 Agribon. That'll keep it down to -12. So remember, you've already got your greenhouse, and now you've got your next layer, which is your fabric, and you've got your heat coming up from your heating pad. And those are starting to root out. So we started them just 2 weeks ago, and they're already starting to root. I had to check a few, and they're getting some buds coming out. So the raspberries that I started, and you're saying, why those raspberries? Why don't you just buy them at the store? Well, I have some in my garden that are okay, but my neighbor has the better kind. She has a kind that starts to bloom early in the spring, and she starts to get raspberries in April. I won't believe it until I actually see it myself, but that's what she tells me. They get them from April right through to October. So clearly they're not the old-fashioned raspberries like the Boynes that I've been growing all these years. This must be a newer type or something different, but they just can't remember because it's her father's garden. They just don't know anymore what kind they planted. So instead of trying to find the right kind, I've just found the right gardener, and I've taken cuttings from her. So I'm very excited about that. So if you're thinking about doing cuttings, I would say I should probably properly answer to Caroline. Yes, I would say knock off that snow. If you have time. Oh, what I would say is that if you're thinking about starting things from scratch, I would definitely do raspberries, blackberries. What else would I do? All the cherries. I would not do apple trees or pear trees. The trouble is with apples and pears, they're larger trees and they're usually grafted. And those grafted roots would be a problem. The grafted roots usually are dwarfing the plant. And so if you don't have the dwarfing rootstock, you might get too big a tree. I just thought of something else. Because of that rose question that we had earlier, if you want to spread roses, if you've got a fantastic rose that you know that someone has that you would like to try, this is the best time of year when they're completely dormant to go out and take cuttings of roses, put them in the rooting hormone, get them into either a sand bed, or I just use the Pro Mix, and get them onto a heating pad. Maybe put a plastic cover over them if you're doing them in the house so that they stay nice and humid. And if you've got a friend with a favorite rose, it doesn't even matter if you know what kind of rose she has. That's a rose that you could propagate if you do it right now. So it's kind of an exciting time of year. This is what we're starting to call late winter now. It's definitely late winter on the coast. It's kind of midwinter on the prairies, but it's something that between now and another month from now, you can still be taking cuttings and it's considered late winter, and that lets you start things. So roses are a really good idea. If you have a friend that has some nice roses, this is a good time to get those roses and get them started. Well, we're almost out of time. We have used up 25 minutes already. So, oh, Margo's back and she's got a question. How about starting Saskatoons? Definitely. Saskatoons grow really well on their own root. And so definitely if you go out, so again, when you go out, don't try to take all these little cuttings when you're out in the field. Just take a few of the bigger branches. Just gather up a bundle, take them into somewhere warmer like your workshop or your greenhouse or even your kitchen, and then you start to cut them down to size. And Saskatoons, depending on if you had a rainy summer or a dry summer, a rainy summer, there'll be longer spaces between each bud. So it wouldn't hurt to have a 10-inch piece, but usually fairly short, about 6 inches, 15 centimeters is all you need, as long as you've got a couple of vibrant buds there. And as long as you've cut right below the bottom bud. So don't cut right above it, because then you've got a big stick that's going to rot. You want to have that little bud, because that's when the roots will come out from that lowest bud. And I think Saskatoons would be a really, yes, definitely. I think they would be a really good thing to start from cuttings, especially if you have a favorite kind of Saskatoon. I know some people have a certain variety that they like. Maybe Margo has a certain variety. She's very good on this. Believe me, trust me. So she'll be good at it. Well, we're almost out of time. And I just want to wrap up by saying next week I am in Salt Spring Island, and I think that's free to all the members of the garden club there. And I'm sure they'll welcome drop-ins if you want to get up to Salt Spring Island. I know there's some people that visit from Calgary and from Alberta and go out to Salt Spring. And what else did I want to mention today? Oh, I had some other ideas. I've been selling some biochar online, and some of it at the CD Saturdays, and it's from Airterra. And I really love the air. You can see it at my shop. I love the Airterra biochar, but I'm realizing that the packages are not coming with the inoculation method. If you just buy biochar, if you don't know what it is, it's a product that's very it's wood usually, but could be any organic matter that's been burned, and they control the burn, like when you put a jar over top of a candle and the oxygen's cut off and then the burn is controlled and your candle goes out. It's the same with biochar. So they try to burn it not completely down to ash, but so that it still has the structure of the tree, and then they grind it up very fine. So biochar, the brand, the Airterra brand, oops, I showed that too quickly. The Airterra brand is the one I grow, or I grow it, I sell it, because it's been CFIA approved, which is the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. So it actually has no creosote in it or other kinds of garbage, because anything that can be burned can be turned into biochar. And I don't want any leads or arsenics or any of those other products in my biochar. And even though I'm not eating it, you would say, why do you need it CFIA approved? I don't want that going into my soil. So I'm being very careful with that. So I'm using the Airterra biochar, and there is that recipe for it. So if you haven't got that and you've got some biochar and you'd like to know, because if you just put it straight in your garden, it's going to take a while for all the microbes to get inoculated into the biochar. So it's better if you do that job ahead of time before you use it, or before you top dress the beds in your greenhouse or the beds. And I was telling Rob, who is the inventor of this particular brand, the Airterra brand, I was telling him that I had my soil tested in my greenhouse, and the biggest difference I made was I put in biochar inoculated with my compost, and 3 years later, my nutrients are so much better than they were. So that gets us back to that very first question from Josie. I wonder if biochar would be good in your garden if you've got micronutrients. And anyone on the prairies, actually, with the pH being so high, sometimes it's really hard to make the micronutrients available. So I wanted to mention biochar. I wanted to mention next week, and I wanted to say I'll be back in time to do Facebook Live again next week. So thanks for joining me. We had a really amazing turnout today. I'm really excited about that, and I can't wait to get all your questions. I will stay on for another sort of 10 minutes in case we get some more questions, and otherwise I'm signing off today. So if you don't follow me already, please do. It's donnabalzer.com, and you can go on, and then you'll get my newsletter about once a month. Sometimes it's every 5 weeks. And with the newsletter, you can then give me all of your feedback, and people love it. There's lots of new gardening things happening. And Julia, if you're still with us, if you sign up for my newsletter at donnabalzer.com, you will know when I'm starting things and how I'm starting them, and that'll help you follow along and learn by doing. So thanks very much, everyone. We'll talk to you again next week. Don't work too hard. Get out to your greenhouse. I just started my tomatoes 3 days ago. Now, most people won't need to start them until March. I usually don't start them until mid-March, but I'm going to be planting early in my greenhouse this year. So with those final words, have a great week.